The first lesson in this series shows you how to use the AccuTerm GUI Designer to create a form for a sample order entry GUI application. We will also use the code generator to create the initial program code for this application. Let's get started. We open AccuTerm and open a connection to our host and log on to our development account. In order to create an AccuTerm GUI application, the AccuTerm host programs must be installed on the host system. When installing the host programs, be sure to install the GUI programs as well. Installation instructions can be found in the AccuTerm User's Guide. In order to create our order entry application, we will use the GUI Designer to lay out the form for our user interface. Once the form is designed, we can use the code generator to create basic code to work with our form. The GUI Designer can be launched from the toolbar or from TCL. Since this is a new project, we'll just click the OK button to create a new GUI application. This opens up the Properties dialog for the new application object. The GUI Application object contains some settings or properties which will apply to the overall project. The first property we need to specify is the application name. The name is important because anytime we need to reference the application object or any of its descendants, we will use this name. By default, when we create a new application object, the item ID for our project will be used as the application's name. Most Windows programs use the single document interface style, so we will use this style for our order entry application. If we selected multiple document interface, the application object would become the main window and any forms would display as child windows within the main window. The SDI style does not have a main window. Each form is independent and can be moved anywhere on the screen. The application object also defines the coordinate system used for our project. The default scale is characters, which approximates the terminal screen coordinates most MultiValue developers are used to. Other scales available are pixels, points, inches, and centimeters. Now let's look at the properties in the Application tab. Here we can give our application a title, which is displayed in the title bar of the main MDI window, the project's template ID, and choose the type of help used in our project. We can also enter a description and a copyright, the author, and the program version. These items will be displayed in the project's About box. Next, we can designate if we want the Enter key to work like the Tab key. If we set this to No, the Enter key will work as it does in other Windows applications. It is basically equivalent to clicking the OK button. If we set this to Yes, the Enter key will work just like the Tab key, advancing to the next field. If we set this to Contingent, the Enter key will work like the Tab key most of the time, However, when the active control is a multi-line text box, the Enter key will insert a new line in the text box. And if the active control is a command button, the Enter key will click the button. There is a side effect to setting this to yes or contingent. You will not be able to have a true OK button on any of your forms in this project. For our project, we are going to set this to contingent so that users migrating from character-based applications will feel comfortable. Finally, we can choose to have existing text selected when users tab into a text box control, making it easy to replace existing text without manually selecting it first. Now we click the Create button to finish creating the application object. Now that we have created the application object for our project, let's create a form for the user interface. We click the form icon in the GUI Object toolbox, which is shown on the left side of the Designer window. The Properties dialog pops up so we can enter the form's properties. Let's change the name of our form from Form 1 to Order. Like the application name, we will need to use this name from our program code to reference the form object. We can change the form's style if desired, but for our order entry project, a simple fixed-sized form will work fine. We need to enter a caption to display in the form's title bar. And we could adjust its initial position and size here, but it's easier to adjust the size in the design window. Let's take a look at the other property tabs. Each GUI object type has a set of events that it is capable of firing. Events are used to connect the user interface with the application business logic. We will take a closer look at events in the next lesson. The Colors tab is used to select the form's background color and foreground or text color. These colors are inherited by other GUI objects as they are placed on the form. Like colors, the font properties will be inherited by other GUI objects as they are placed on the form. A form may have a picture as a background. If you want to use a picture for your form's background, enter the picture file name here. You can also enter a URL if the background picture is stored on a web server. A form can also have a custom icon. Just like the picture in the previous tab, you can enter a file name or a URL here as well. Now click the Create button to create our form. Let's drag the corner to size the form so it is large enough for all the fields we're going to need in our application. Now we can add GUI objects, also known as controls, to our form to create the user interface. But before we start, let's take a look at the GUI Object toolbox to become familiar with what kind of controls are available. As we have already seen, we can create forms, we can create labels, which are display-only text fields, text boxes, for text entry either single or multi-line, list boxes for selecting one or more items from a list, a combo box where a user can enter an item directly as text or choose it from a list, checkbox for Boolean data, option or radio buttons, command buttons, grid, which is ideal for related multi-value data sets, frame, which acts as a container for other objects, picture, to display an image, which is also a container, tab, tree, for displaying hierarchical data structures such as menus, gauge or progress bar, main menu, pop-up menu, and toolbar. Now that we know what kinds of objects are available to use in creating our user interface, let's examine the data fields we want to include in the project. For an order, we are going to need a customer number and name, an order number, order date, and a purchase order number. We will also need to include the order items, which is a multi-valued set of the following fields: quantity, part number, description, price, and extension. It would also be nice to show the total amount of the order. Let's begin with the customer number. First, we add a label. We enter the caption. And click Create to create the label. We now drag the label into position and resize it. Now add a text box and name it txcust. We are changing the name of this object because we will be accessing it from our program code, and we want to make our program as understandable as possible for ease of maintenance. We have several text box styles to choose from. In this case, a simple single-line text box is all we need. We click the Create button to create the object and drag it into position next to its label and size it. Now let's create a field for the customer name. Here we are going to use two labels, one to identify the field and the other to display its value. The reason we use a label to display the value here is because this is going to be a read-only field. Click the Label button in the toolbox and enter name for the caption. Click Create, and now drag the label after the customer number and size it. Click Label again to create the label to display the name, and here we'll change the ID to LB name. This way references in program code will make sense. We'll leave the caption blank at this time because we will fill in this caption at runtime once we read our customer record in. But let's change the border style to 3D so that it will look just like a text box. Click OK, and we'll drag and size the label. Now our form has fields for the customer number and name. Next, let's add the order number. For the order number field, let's use a drop-down list so that the user can select an existing order to modify. We'll also create a new order button so the user can create a new order. Click the Label button and enter the caption. Let's change the ID. You may wonder why we need a nice ID for this label, because in a future lesson we will be writing code to disable or gray out this label before we have read a customer record, and then enable it once the customer record has been read in. Now let's click the Create button to create the label and position it underneath the customer number label, and adjust its size. Since a drop-down list is a variant of the list box, we click the List Box button in the toolbox to create our drop-down list object. We'll change our ID and then select the style as drop-down list. Notice that there is a new tab in the Properties dialog this time, List. Let's select the List tab and see what's new. AccuTerm GUI list box control can display multiple columns of data in the list. If our list required multiple columns, say an order number, order date, and purchase order, we could click on the New Column button to add a new column to the list, and then enter headings and alignments and sizes. If the contents of our list were static, we can click the Items tab and enter the list contents at this time. But for our project, the list contents are dynamic, which we read from the customer's file. So we will just click the Create button, and then we'll adjust the position and size of our drop-down list. In order to allow our users to create new orders, we will add a command button. Let's change the ID to CMD new and enter the button's caption. Click the Create button, and then move and size our new command button just after our drop-down list. Now our form has fields for customer and order IDs, so let's add a couple of data fields from the order record, date and purchase order. We are going to use simple text boxes for these fields with labels to identify the field. Now, for the date field, we're going to take advantage of local data validation by the text box object by setting the data type to date. When we select a data type for a text field, the GUI runtime ensures that the data matches the specified type and displays an error message and reprompts if the entered data does not match. This occurs without any program code. We'll click Create and move and size the text box. Now the real fun begins. Let's create a grid control for the order items. Let's call our grid GRD items. Since we want to allow our users to enter data into our grid, we're going to choose the editable style. To lay out our grid with the 5 multi-valued fields described earlier, click the Grid tab. This tab looks similar to the List tab we saw earlier when creating our drop-down list, but includes a new drop-down list tab as well as several other per-column properties. Recall that the fields we are going to display in our grid are quantity, part number, description, price, and extension. Let's start by entering the column heading for the first column and check that the field type for this column is text box. This will allow the user to enter data in this column. Now we can change the data type for this column from any to numeric. So that only numeric data will be accepted. Let's click the New Column After button to add the part number column. We'll enter the column heading. Because our sample database has only a small number of part numbers, let's use a drop-down list for the part number. Now we click the New Column After button to add the description column. We'll use a field type of label for this column because we are going to read the description from the product file and not allow the user to update it here. Click New Column After to add the price column. Again, for this column, we'll change the field type to label because the price will be read from our product file. Let's make the price column right justified. Finally, we'll click New Column After to create our final column for extension and enter the heading. Again, we'll make this field type label because this is a calculated field, and we'll change the alignment to right justified. Now let's adjust the column sizes. We can use drag and drop to move the dividing bar between the columns to adjust our column sizes. Let's take a look at the Items tab. By selecting the Automatically Add New Lines to Grid checkbox, the user will be able to easily add new items to an order. When the user enters anything on the last line of the grid, a new line will automatically be added. Let's create our grid by clicking the Create button, and then we'll size and position it. To display the order total, we now add a couple of labels and place them under the grid. To make the total label appear like a text box, we'll change its border to 3D, and let's make it right justified as well. Finally, let's add OK, Cancel, and Close command buttons. Note that the OK button style is grayed out. This is because we chose special processing for the Enter key back when we created the application object. If we had changed the Enter Same as Tab property to No, the OK button style would be available and we could select it here. Selecting Cancel button for the button style allows the Escape key to behave just like clicking this button. Our basic form design is now finished. To see what it will actually look like at runtime, we can use the Preview feature of the GUI Designer. The Preview feature will display the form exactly the way it will appear at runtime. Once we are satisfied with the form layout, we can save it by simply clicking the Save button on the toolbar. This saves our project back on the host. Let's close the designer now and look at the project using the line editor. Notice that the project item is a normal pick item which contains all of the objects we created in the designer and all of the design time properties that we set. We can also modify the project by opening it again in the GUI Designer. The final task in this lesson is to create a basic program that will display this form. The GUI Designer includes a code generator and editor. To invoke the code generator, we click the Code button from the toolbar. Since no program code item has been associated with this project yet, the Create New Code Item option is already selected. We can simply accept the default selections for code template and casing style and just click the OK button. The code generator creates a program for our project and opens the code in the web editor window. This is a fully functional basic program that will display the order entry form we just created. It has stubs for event handler subroutines, which we will cover in the next lesson. In the next lesson, we will select the events we are interested in and code the event handlers for these events, connecting the user interface events with the application's business logic. At this time, let's save our program. And now we can compile the program by clicking the Compile button on the web editor toolbar. Let's close the editor and the designer and run our program. And here it is. We can enter data, but remember that we have not written any event handlers at this time that will connect user interface events with the database. In the next lesson, we will show how to handle the validate event for the customer number text box and use it to trigger reading the customer record from the database and displaying the name and order numbers. Subsequent lessons will show how to handle the click event from the order list and populate the grid with the order items.